We think for a European technology company, crossing the Atlantic is important if they want to become a category leader.
The opportunities in the US to become a more sophisticated, truly international business are really rich, both in terms of financial potential, but also from a founder's perspective in terms of intellectual challenge.
The challenge for any European technology company that wants to achieve scale is, do they expand across Europe or do they expand internationally?
We always had it within our plan that the UK was just a kind of stepping stone to bigger markets, and there's no bigger market than the US.
We had probably expected to make most of the impact in our home market in Dublin and the UK. However, what we started to see was we got a lot of pull from the US in terms of the inbound leads. We've seen that these as well too are higher converting and lower cost leads for us. So that probably took us a little bit by surprise, given the fact that our largest competitor is a listed company that has a good US presence and a pretty poor European or EMEA presence.
Ultimately, you need to go where you are most likely to build a large, successful business.
You're going to be thinking globally from the outset, but the critical step in creating a beachhead in the US is to cross-sell from your domestic customers to US customers.
We were able to sign some pretty well-known customer names in the US through the customers that we'd already signed in the UK, and we were able to do that remotely from the UK, so without making the big investment in the US market.
You need to validate the US market before you invest in putting people on the ground. You need to establish product market fit to ensure that the product you developed resonates with the US market.
When we started to go through this US customer, we saw that they were more representative of an ideal customer for us. It's a more mature SaaS market, a more mature fitness market. They're more sophisticated in terms of their business strategies, and they're a lot more open to adopting software on a remote basis and dealing with a company of our size.
The US is a very different market from a legal perspective, so forewarned is forearmed. You need to make sure you get really good advice on a number of tax, immigration, and legal issues.
When you're setting up your corporate structure, you absolutely can't scrimp in terms of the advice that you take. You know, that's a real investment, but you're laying the foundations for the US organization. So it's something that if you don't get it right, it can come back to bite you in a really, really major way.
There's people out there that'll stick their hand in your pocket pretty quick to take money off you to tell you how to do it. So having probably trusted people has been really, really helpful.
The biggest challenge with immigration is that you cannot control it yourself.
The moment that you think you will bring your company to the US would be the moment that you would pick up the phone and speak to your immigration advisor.
There are some key international practices you need to consider. For example, transfer pricing, IP assignment, employment contracts, share option schemes. These might all seem unimportant right at the beginning, but they can really bite you at a later stage if you don't get them right.
I've seen companies that have been successful in the UK and they come to the US with all the best intentions, but they arrive without actually having any sort of infrastructure from an office, from a tax, from an HR perspective, which immediately puts you on the back foot.
You don't want to be distracted from hitting your growth targets by getting embroiled in a conversation with the IRS or the Fed about things that could have really easily been avoided.
Everyone that goes to the US typically has a funding plan. So I think that you should add the immigration and recruitment as well, because when you do that, you create a holistic view of where you're going, and that will save you time and money.
To me, it's like the foundation stones. It's not necessarily the exciting stuff. It is a major investment to get it right, but it's something that you absolutely must do, and you need to do it at the beginning.
Hiring in the US is particularly challenging for a lot of European founders. On the practical side, we're not used to having to develop compensation packages that are as nuanced and comprehensive as they have in the US.
Any European, UK company coming to the States is going to want to do right from the get-go is make an impactful splash, really start generating the brand, generating interest in the organization, create strong digital content and messaging. All of these activities, by leveraging a network, are absolutely critical.
You need to try and be as competitive as you can be from a salary and a benefits perspective. And then through the hiring process, you want to make sure that you are selling the vision and the opportunity of your company and the role.
It is a strategic activity that needs to be driven by the board with the commitment of the board and the executive leadership team to commit endeavour, energy, passion, and obviously cash, ensuring that they can actually compete and with the right messaging, secure the quality of talent that they require to be successful.
There are three factors that are going to influence your choice of location. One is going to be time zone, and that is really important at the early stage. The second is going to be access to customers, and the third is going to be talent. I would urge people to really think about talent first and foremost.
New York was the right location for us operationally because it was close to the UK in terms of travel time and time zone. It was also close to two of our big customer groups in financial services and government.
From an investor perspective, and also as we're continuing to build our brand and launch our category, then the biggest influences are around San Francisco, and therefore we've now built our operating headquarters in San Francisco.
Let's think farther afield. Let's think of places like Atlanta and Austin, Texas, that actually have fantastic educational ecosystems. They also are key airline hubs. Delta is actually headquartered out of Atlanta. So really broadening and thinking outside of the San Francisco or nothing box, I would definitively encourage.
The US is a market that you really need to take seriously. And I think one way to really demonstrate that is for one of the founders to move over.
I'm excited to go over. As a CEO, you got to be on the tip of the spear. You know, you have to be in the front line. You have to be the one to make the move.
Most founders are, at least should be, the embodiment of their cultures, and therefore, if you're hoping to maintain any kind of coherence or consistency in your company as it scales internationally, then the founder is the best person to lead that export charge.
Americans, on average, do like buying from other Americans, but they also like ultimately closing deals with decision makers who they know are empowered to make decisions on behalf of the company.
So I think as a founder, the most important thing you should take when you move over there is an open mind and an awareness that you are probably going to have to do a lot of learning from scratch.
The US is ostensibly a homogenous market, but there are a lot of differences within different parts of the US as well. And there will be clear differences in terms of buyer behaviour versus your home market. So you need to take the time to really understand those differences.
Customers in the US, I think we found, like to be more involved with their vendors. They like to actually feed into product development. They like to feel that they can have an influence over your decisions.
Once we started to get in more US customers that were probably a little bit more ahead of the curve, that were giving more future-proofing feedback in terms of where the product and the industry is going, and we agreed with that viewpoint on it, and starting to listen to them more and understanding the challenges, not specifically what they wanted our software to do, but more their business challenges and how we could innovate and solve them within our software. That's when we really started to shoot ahead at competition.
You have a constant stream of feedback upon which you can iterate and respond to, and it's a great opportunity in the early stages to ensure you're developing a product that actually has a market for it. It's essential to define your culture before you export your company to the US, because over time, and especially in such a highly pressurized, fast-moving environment, the risk of the core values and reason for why you started the business being diluted become very high.
Thinking global and acting local is, I think, really important when you're entering the US market. First and foremost, present yourself as a US business.
You have to sort of try and be the organization that you're going to be in maybe a year's time. So you're not making it all up, but you're really talking about the future. You're talking almost in presumptive terms about the organization that you're going to be, because everybody in the US is doing that. They're talking about everything in big, big terms and big scale. And I think if you don't do that, particularly if you're not from the US, you'll end up getting sidelined as this little parochial company from England.
As an individual founder or CEO, you simply cannot be in every interview and in all the places at one time. If you have a codified set of instructions that sets out the vision and how you want to communicate that with the world, it's a lot easier to delegate and for other people to spread the word and raise awareness of your business, and crucially, hire people who fit in with the kind of culture that you're trying to create within your business.
Scaling your organisation, building the team is going to be, I think, the toughest challenge for any early stage company expanding into the US.
In most of the major tech hubs around the world, you will have a concentration of highly skilled tech talent. However, you will always be facing hiring challenges wherever you go.
The competition in places like San Francisco is very fierce, and that's widely understood. In New York, it's a little bit different, but if you're a fintech business, you're in fierce competition with some of the world's leading financial institutions.
There's a real war for talent in tech in the US, and you need to be positioned really well if you want to get great people on board.
I've had a lot of founders tell me that they have been swayed by the American confidence that many prospective candidates bring to the interview table. This is a nation of people who are amongst the best in the world at selling themselves, and be prepared to be skeptical because you might find that the person who promises everything in the interview room might not be all they're cracked up to be, so it's worth bringing a little bit of that British cynicism so that you don't get sold a pup.
I think the most important thing for me is just to not be afraid of anything. I'm just not daunted by anything anymore, and I was massively daunted when I went to New York. I would just be looking up at all the buildings like a little kid and just thinking, you know, what am I doing here? This is just... I think it gives you confidence to know that it can be done. You can get out there, and everything that you do in the US is kind of 10x what it could be in the UK. So it's a tremendously exciting and rewarding market.